Hi everyone, and welcome to the web series How to Indigenous Governance and Diplomacy for the Now. I am Inikili Pichari from Cunayala and from TV Indigena based in Panama. Today is the first of 8 consecutive Fridays. We will be speaking with prominent Indigenous leaders in governance and diplomacy, including experts, heads of Indigenous representative institutions, sharing their insight and ideas to help guide Indigenous governance and diplomacy as we define the new normal. Before we kick off this episode with today's amazing lineup of guests, I would like to remind our social media tags at Gomaluku and hashtag How to Indigenous Now. Well, our first guest is Mr. Tuomas Aslak Juuso, a Sami from North Finland, and since 2007 has become a regular in the global international indigenous movement. He started in the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus and grew the spokesperson for the Sami and the Arctic in many different processes, including the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. He's currently the president of the Sami Parliament in Finland, and he's serving his 3 period in the parliament. One of his main priorities at the UN is the enhanced participation process for Indigenous peoples, representative institution in the UN General Assembly and Human Rights Council. He is the one that came with the idea for this webinar series. So Ghazali, please help me welcoming Tuomas.
Oh, thank you so much, Ini, and this is a great initiative, and thank you so much for hosting this whole thing as well. Jumping real quick into it, Tuomas, full disclosure, yes, he is the guy that came in with this idea from the get-go. Just taking you like a month and a half back, he came up with the idea, and yeah, we just played around with it, and now it's actually coming to life. Very good friend of mine. We make a lot of fun of the work that we do, as in like we have a lot of fun. So we have a lot of fun in the work that we do. In my mind, one of the world-class political minds, upcoming political minds in the indigenous movement that we can enjoy. So hopefully, where is Tuomas? Yeah, there he is. Tuomas, because you started this whole thing, let me start off by giving you the floor for an opening statement, State of the Union. What are you seeing? Thoughts on governance, diplomacy in the now for 2 minutes before we go into questions.
Well, thank you, Ghazali, and it's good to see that this series have been happening now and starting from the beginning, and it's been a couple of nice 2 months, and it's really nice to see that this is happening. I mean, first of all, it's a pleasure to have a topic of indigenous governance and representation as a topic, and I really think that this is a good way to familiarize and really explain a little bit more what are the indigenous representative institutions and how indigenous governance, how indigenous diplomacy should be done. And I really much want to also listen to everybody that has been registered as a speaker to this line. I think you have the top line in the world, and I'm humbled to be part of this group. Of course, indigenous diplomacy and indigenous governance is really important, and through our functions, through our actions, we are having the opportunity to try to improve the situations of indigenous peoples, also towards the United Nations. Currently, representative institutions where I'm coming from, the Sami Parliament in Finland, we don't have a direct access to the United Nations. We cannot participate to all the relevant meetings for us, as we cannot register as an institution to them and to UN. So I think indigenous governance diplomacy is really relevant to the enhanced participation process, what we are now struggling within in the United Nations.
So let me take you also a little bit to the now. How did you react as an institution? You're the president of the Sami Parliament in Finland. How do you react as an institution to the pandemic, and what are you doing to come out strong? Any thoughts on that?
Well, of course, the pandemic has been a new challenge for us as an institution. We do represent officially the Sami people from the Finnish side in the national and Finnish context. We have the Finnish constitution and national legislation behind us. So in order to fulfill that task, you of course would have to have the utmost best opportunities and possibilities to represent your people. And of course, the COVID-19 situation has been challenging for us as traveling, for example, to capital, where most of the decisions are made, and where we live from North Finland, that is 1,000 kilometers away from capital, has been a challenge. But I'm proud of our institution and our secretariat that we've been able to keep the level of work and participation in a proper level, even though everybody of us have been working from home and through Teams or Zoom or these equipments that we have. So it's been a challenge, but hey, we've been able to work and negotiate with the government and do our tasks. So I'm happy.
Awesome. Also, because I want to go quick here because I got so many questions for you. You bring, as a president, a lot of international experience to the parliament, to the Sami people. What value does your international work, or the international work at large, bring to the people to the Sami people, to the people that you represent?
Well, of course, Samis have had a lot of capable people working on international field for a long time. So there are and have been experiences, of course, that have also guided me how to work in the international field. So I think that my experiences can work as an example and know to how the newcomers and those that will continue one day these works or are willing to participate at the international level. But I think that in our institution, we have been able to prioritize and build the structure for the international work. In our parliament, we have established Secretariat for International Issues just last year on a permanent basis. And that is a huge step in our work in order to be capable to follow all the UN processes, EU processes, all where we are, Arctic Council, cooperation with the other Sami parliaments. So it allows us to work with a certain level.
Awesome. Talk to me about the strength and responsibility of being an Indigenous leader at your age. Top challenge, failure, maybe aha moment for aspiring Indigenous leaders that are looking up to you?
Well, I'm though quite young age, still 35, so definitely the responsibility. The side is something that has to be always understood when you are representing and working on behalf of an institution that actually represents the whole people. So that is really crucial to understand that you are working as a leader and you have the responsibility to the institution and to the people. But it's always important to remember that you don't work alone. You have your own people, as we in the parliament have parliamentarians that I do work together and make decisions with them. So I'm just a form of representation of that institution that includes a lot of people, a lot of work, and a lot of expertise. So somebody has to be leading, and I've been given the responsibility. Maybe some aha elements or experiences might be that you always, especially maybe with a younger age, want to do quickly stuff. You want to help your people.
Tell me about it.
issues with the fast time and reaction time. And maybe it's good to remember that that in this work, it might take years or tens of years before you can reach levels that are acceptable to your people to push issues forward. And I think that is something that I have learned from the last couple of years being in the leading positions of the Sami Parliament.
Tagging a little bit into that and unpack that a little bit. How do you grow? Because like you talk about aha moments, you grow as a leader. How does your growth, how does the Parliament grow with that? And also take into account your international experience. Does that make any sense, that question, by the way?
I mean, it does. I mean, every individual brings, of course, different kind of capacities. And especially parliamentarians have different backgrounds, different knowledges, and combining those together will allow you to have a good basis where you start your work and start to reach out for outside. I think that one of my strengths that I've been, I have been in a good position to learn from some of the most greatest minds that I consider in diplomatics overall. I've seen some of the our not elders, but like those people that have been doing the representation work in the international field for tens of years. I've been able to see and follow them for a long time, how they conduct themselves, how they negotiate with governments like Canada, Finland, Russia, China, how they use the diplomatical spaces to push forward issues. And I think that is one of my great strengths and privileges that I've been able to learn and see. And I'm trying now to of course building on all the strengths that I've been able to learn to help the Parliament also push their and our agenda forward together with others, many capable individuals in our Parliament, and we're definitely working together.
Before I continue with the questions, Twitter. How can people reach out to you? What's your Twitter handle? Because I already see some tweets going on, like people, like making some great takeaways. What's your Twitter handle?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter on TAJUUSO.
All right, awesome. So TAJAA, what? TAJUUSO. UUSO. All right. People keep tagging this guy. All right, President. International experience, the next 3 years will be very crucial. Paint me a picture. What does success look like? How will you know, like, this is it, I did it? Give me a personal story or a personal picture and a professional picture, if you can.
Well, I hope that we, at least here on the Finnish side, are able to defend and strengthen the Sami Parliament's role. Some of listeners might know that we have a tricky situation now with the Parliament's mandate with the government, and we hope that the Finnish government would fully respect the rights of self-determination and indigenous self-governance. And I think that is something that is really crucial to everybody also to remember that in order to be successful with your issues, you have to be working with multiple fronts. You have to be working on your own people. You have to be working on the level where you are located. You have to be working on a national level, but you have to be working also on the international level in order to get the full push for your issues in the decision makers in those countries where you are. But also when you are practicing the right to self-determination and making your own decisions and an institution, it's really important that those decisions are real and accountable, and there is a clear accountability for the people, so that you have the full mandate from the people to represent. And I think that is if I would say not maybe a personal success or goal, what I'm trying to achieve, at least from my profession, the goal, what I'm going and trying to achieve, to be exercising full power.
All right, so final 2 minutes, personal observations, things that you are seeing as a leader in terms of representation in the world. Give me a good thing and a bad thing. What are you seeing?
Well, I'm happy that the indigenous movement is still going forward and working together from all the 7 regions. I think that has been our strength, and I think that is and will be our strength in the future. I hope that, for example, in the global movement of, for example, saving the world and trying to get some sense to the world, that the current direction where we are is not maybe the best one for our future, needs people from the indigenous movement to participate also. And I hope that that the indigenous movement and our own institutions all around the world will grow stronger, strengthen their representative nature, and are capable of working together even more stronger.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Tuomas. I know we can talk for much more longer, but I have like a crazy lineup, people waiting after you, trying to top whatever you just said. Thank you so much, and I'll give it back to you, Ini.
Yeah, thank you, Tuomas. And our next guest, Ghazali, on the list is Carson Kibuto. He is a youth leader and community organizer from the Uluru Indigenous community of Kenya. He works on Indigenous peoples' rights, youth empowerment, and global governance. He currently serves as the co-chair of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. Carson is a technical production specialist, contributing to and producing multimedia works such as video shoots, graphic design, and the print media to advance his advocacy work in the area of preservation and transmission of traditional knowledge. Indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge is key in combating climate change as well as environmental conservation. Ghazali, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Ini. Carson, before I start, what is your Twitter handle? If you're...
All right. Thank you, Ghazali. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yeah, you're good. What's your Twitter handle so people can know how to contact you?
Yeah, it's Hot Kiburo. That's my second name that you see right there. Just you search like that, Kiburo.
At Kiburo. All right, awesome. All right, let's jump right into it. You're Endoroi. People know, most of people actually know about the landmark case that you guys won in 2010. As far as I know, little to no movement around that landmark case. Anything cooking in that kitchen from the Endoroi perspective?
Wow. Well, thank you. First of all, I'm a proud son of the Endorais people, and the Endorais won against the government of Kenya, and the landmark case that you've just mentioned in the then African Commission on Human and People's Rights. That is, nowadays it's called African Court on Human and People's Rights. It's headquartered in the Gambia, Banjul, which was almost a surprise. To give a little update, there was a presidential task force set in September 2014, but just that, nothing else. The gazetted commissioners, including the Attorney General, were not interested in engaging the community. And I think people lost their energy along the way to follow up with the government, because even at the lowest hanging fruits of that ruling haven't been plucked by our people. So to say, I'm just giving the way the situation is right now. And save for the official registration of our People's Umbrella Organization and the illegal 10% grant out of the revenues from Lake Bogoria. Yes, and to go back to the question that you asked about something in the kitchen, yes, there's something in the works. I'm using your words, right? Yes, there's something in the works. The community is rebooting the process, just getting the government to implement the recommendations from the court. There were 7 of them, and like I just mentioned, 2 of them have just been scratched a little bit. We would like to revitalize the process. We're revitalizing the energy, linking the elders who took up the fight and my generation who just saw the little bit of the fight for our land rights advocacy. So just to say, well, reaching out to friends, supporters, to try and reboot again, because as our brother Tuomas said, in this fight, we're never alone and we'll never walk alone because we have this movement. Yes, thank you.
Carson, I know you from Project Access last year. You were very active in video and everything, and quickly grew into a leadership role because you were nominated and became the Youth Caucus co-chair. Tell me about like how did you position yourself as a leader, coming from a very new into this work?
I had muted. I like muting so that we don't get a lot of noise, because I'm in somewhere that's.
I hope that you didn't mute your leadership though.
All right. So I was born to give. I would start with that. It wasn't positioning. I was just born to give. And I am more than happy to offer that time and energy to advance causes that help humanity in the socioeconomic perspective. And that is how I found myself here. It's been a lot of volunteering from the community level all the way up to that level when we met together. And it's been, at the international level, it's been 3 years. The experience has been there, gained over time, shortly before and when I came of age. And so it's about giving the skills that you have to the causes that are dear to you. And now when you grow up to be an adult, you see what makes sense to the people, your people, or the people that that help also your people. So basically creating a community. That is, I'm so passionate about that. And to me, that is leadership, giving yourself to lead through volunteering. It's not just that you gain anything. It's like the gain that you see from people developing and lives transforming, people seeing realizing their rights, especially those who are vulnerable like our own. And that has been, that to me positioned me to be there. Yeah, thank you, Ghazali.
No, thank you. What, because you are the you're now co-chairing the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. What is the biggest misconception that people have about how easy or hard it is to lead a caucus? Because I have experience in that. I would like to know what your thoughts are on that.
Wow, it's good to share to a wide range of audience today to share about that. I believe the biggest misconception, the elephant in the room, is power. People think that leading is about power, but you're given, you're entrusted that power. And Tuomas said it, and so glad he shed some light on it. The power to lead, you're given by the people, and or the space that you lead in. So it is a huge blindsiding effect to think that you have power. You don't have power. The power belongs to the people that you lead, the collective that gave you the power. So that is the biggest misconception. And I'm glad that I'm conscious in this. And I know that power corrupts. But again, it's beyond that power that you've been entrusted by the community to exercise in the space of the collective. A caucus is a network. And in this case, it is an avenue to to advocate for the causes of the caucus, of the people, and where you come from. It humbles me to see my community, my family, and to see that a lot of those rights are still, even that's the basic human rights, you don't see them, and that is the key word. What you see in the people should reflect on your own leadership. Yeah. Thank you, Ghazali.
Right. All right. You talk about seeing. Let's talk about observations then. Any thoughts on indigenous leadership strategies? Do you see any gaps? And if so, what are your ideas to fill them? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's diplomacy and internal governance mechanism. First of all, the Indigenous Peoples movement has grown, and I pay respect to the leaders who came before us. They fought to where we are right at the moment. And every time I'm in this space, I tremble with respect to those who sacrifice for us to get this space. And so the question is, what are we doing in the gaps that we see, or the gaps that we have in this space? So Indigenous people's challenges are compounded by inadequate leadership structures and strategies to engage. We need to enhance the synergy, and we have technology right now. Perhaps we can have a sustainable medium to share our struggles, gains, and best practices. These should trickle down to the grassroots organizing. There are people who even cannot access these technologies that we have right now. And so it should trickle down to those who cannot access these kind of technologies that we are rising up and responding even in the face of disaster. I don't know if I best answered that, but those are the thoughts there.
Oh, perfect. Like they're all I'm asking for your thoughts, so because you're a leader, you have your own opinion, your own perspectives. I think that's very valuable. Talking about that current pandemic, COVID-19, how do you view this moment? Do you view it as an opportunity, a concern, a step backwards maybe? How do you process it? What do you see?
I keep on muting and I realize that I'm talking. Thankfully, there's the Zoom senses that you're talking, and you have to unmute. Yeah, so let me go back to your question. So at the moment, right now, I'm learning to share my thoughts because it not only helps me, but it may inspire someone out there, but also get thoughts from people and our support systems, those in solidarity. Because in these kind of spaces that we do have, it's good that we share our best practices, our fears, our struggles, and even in the face of a disaster like this, we've always had these underlying threats. And now we use these technologies to share these practices, and to share the threats that we undergo in our communities, best practices, for example, on how to improve our food systems and food security, health. And we're going back and seeing that traditional knowledge has always been perfect. It's been refined over time. And so this is a moment to reflect and go back to the ways of our forefathers and our ancestors, and see how they've always practiced this. Because for my generation as well, most of them are even struggling to speak their languages. And right now, you need to, if you are living with your community, or in your community, if you are able to learn your language, learn it. If you are able to learn some craft, an indigenous craft, that is, do it right now. If it is indigenous farming systems, do it. For us, I come from a pastoralist community that is almost also changing into, because of the changing times, we're practicing crop agriculture. And so do this right now. Ask your community, your eldest members of your community, do something to learn the life ways of your people. Yeah.
I love it, man. I love your thoughts. So very grateful that you're like have a leadership position in the movement now. Sorry, you're in the movement, and also very grateful that I have a leadership position. Talk to me about, because you're good at you're good at it. You're so good at your video production. Talk to me about that particular kind of creativity, and like how do you make it relevant in the indigenous diplomacy? Any thoughts or opportunities maybe?
And I have to do this. All right. So I like this question so much because it's about the craft that it's inborn in me and using it to advance the advocacy of the causes that I just mentioned. And so this is why I started this. It is to tell the story of our people. Devoid of prejudice or stereotypes, how people view us, how the conventional media run our stories. And so to just ignite the pride and sense of belonging from these great people who have a huge history, I thought of doing this, and I keep telling people that it started way back, and I knew it even in my childhood. I grew up in a village, and I knew every by the time that I knew how to read and write, I would go to a village shop and borrow some newspapers to read and understand how these people write, how do they tell the story, because we didn't have television. So that was the media that was available, and I would see, I always aspired to write for these big media. And so I started seeing some socioeconomic injustices or some things that were not in place, and I changed into this. I volunteered, and first it was a backlash because my dad didn't approve media and law, because he says that these are people who manipulate the truth. Do you do that, Ghazali? I know you don't. And so my dad said that none of his kids would do law and media. And so it was devastation because I was a kid. I just had him telling one of my eldest brothers. And so, well, I thought, if I can do this to advance the causes that are dear to our people, then it makes a difference. And so right now is a proud father, because I do it for the right reasons, to tell the story of our people. So when our stories are, basically what I'm saying is, when our stories are written and shared by us, the voice is clear. In the world, our neighbors or governments will understand why we just want to be who we are. We should leverage on technology as an opportunity to set our story right. And so multimedia technology comes into this opportune moment. All our knowledge in culture, food systems, climate action, and health systems have been refined, and it's age-old. It's an age-old wisdom that has been refined over time, because colonization made us believe that we are dark race. No, and we can use this form of diplomacy to decolonize our own people and the scions of colonizers, which we see even right now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carson. One thing that I'd like to give to you is like keep creating content as much as possible. Your story needs to be told, and your talents make use of them. So 100%. Thank you so much for your contribution. Ini, we're off to a great start. Who's next?
Yes, thank you, Carson. Thank you, Ghazali. Yes, our next guest is Professor Megan Davies from the Indigenous Caucus in Australia. She is a Pro-Vice-Chancellor Indigenous and Professor of Law at the University of New South Wales. Also, member of the UNEMRIP, former member to the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. She's a constitutional lawyer who was a member of the Referendum Council and the experts panel on the recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples in the Constitution. She is also a commissioner on the Australian Rugby League Commission. Megan supports the North Queensland Cowboys and the Queensland Maroons. Nice.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I'm not a league person. I'm more of a union, but I think that we can, because you have two codes, right? In rugby, you have league and you have union.
Very different codes, very different.
Sorry about that. Full disclosure, Megan Davis, we talk, there's one video that goes around the internet, goes on around YouTube and Facebook about that UNEMRIP, when we talked about the legally binding nature of the declaration, which was a very good tag team that we did from the floor and the expert mechanism. Yeah. And in my view, that is how the indigenous peoples and experts members should be interacting. We'll definitely talk about more about that. We started talking about rugby. You're indigenous lawyer, Snapchat, indigenous Instagram connoisseur, law professor, commissioner NRL, which is pretty left field for many of our colleagues out there, but makes sense to you. What's your vision and approach to achieve that vision?
Do you mean in terms of rugby league or just my work?
Both.
Yeah, no, well, I suppose rugby league's interesting because it's a game that was played very early in Australia's history. It arrived in Australia about 1908, but it was a time where Aboriginal people were segregated. It was a period of racial segregation. And rugby league provided an opportunity for Aboriginal men to leave the reserves or the missions, have permission to leave and go play rugby league with other Australian men. And it was a really interesting and remains so a very interesting part of Aboriginal culture. It's a sport that provided some degree of, or to some extent, emancipatory potential for people that were, when I say for people, virtually every Aboriginal person who was in that, what they call, benignly called the protection era. It's not an uncommon approach that the British Crown took in many of the countries that it colonized, invaded and colonized. And so, yeah, the sport means a lot to me because, my great grandfather played the sport. I mean, it is the sport that people play in the two biggest populated states in Australia, and so it's played a really important role in terms of reconciliation and race relations in Australia. So, when I was asked to join the board, I was chair of the permanent forum at the time and said no because I wouldn't be able to contribute the time that I needed to. But when they came back the second time, I was like, I was nuts to say no the first time. I'm not going to give it up this time.
Thank you so much. Oh, by the way, Megan, what is your Twitter handle? How can people reach you?
I have no idea, actually. I think it's something to do with Queenslander, something to do with the state of origin. I think it's Prof. And yeah, it's not Prof. It's M Davis Queenslander. So MDAVIS QLDER, and Queensland's the state where I grew up.
Okay, thank you so much, because I know the people will definitely quote you on on a lot of things. If people Google you, of course, like the NRL will come up, but Uluru Statement as well. I know that's very dear to you. What is it? What is your relationship in there, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, so the Uluru Statement is the culmination of a couple of decades of Aboriginal advocacy for constitutional reform. Really, I mean, we are an Indigenous people in which the British Crown didn't enter into a treaty. So we're in 2020 and we don't have any kind of treaty agreement, and no real reckoning or recognition of that original grievance. That is to say, there's been no agreement that has been made between the state and First Nations peoples about sovereignty, and therefore there's a lot of unfinished business between us and the nation. And so, we don't have a Bill of Rights, we don't have any form of recognition in the Constitution. So one of the things that I think we have been seeking is some form of substantive, concrete constitutional recognition that will provide our people with some power and a basis in which to achieve the rest of the aspirations that we have in terms of treaty and even truth-telling. I mean, we, in terms of the Uluru Statement, believe that the Australian government and successive governments have have too readily used truth-telling as a way of, we call it can kicking. But Australian governments have too readily used truth-telling as a way of avoiding substantive structural reform. So that's a really, I think, significant part of the Uluru Statement is what we're calling for is a structural voice. So we want to compel the state to have us at the table on decisions that are made about us in terms of laws and policy. It's something like a duty to consult, but it's a bit stronger than a duty to consult. So that's the Uluru Statement. Vicky, when she was Special Rapporteur, actually came to one of the Uluru Statement dialogues.
Yep.
And wrote about it in one of her reports. But you know, my time on the UN, Ghazali, you know, 6 years on the forum. I mean, I really started 22 years ago as a little kid when I did the UN fellowship. But I've seen the ways in which other liberal democracies recognise and accommodate Indigenous peoples within the framework of the state. And so this is quite a common way, right? And so it's one that really interests us and fits with the kind of sentiment that we feel about the Australian state, and that is a very strong sense of powerlessness and voicelessness. And so the Uluru Statement is about addressing that.
Oh, awesome. So zooming out a little bit from Australia into like the global, you've 6 years at the Perm Forum and now at UNEMRIP. And what are the biggest surprises so far that you see, positive and or negative, on Indigenous rights?
I mean, there's so many answers to that question. I mean, so one surprise, I suppose, post-declaration on the rights of Indigenous peoples has been that we, in my view, and we've written a report, and my chair of the UNEMRIP is on the line, Lila. We've written a free, prior, and informed consent report.
Very good report, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. We're surprised in the way that FPIC has surpassed the right to self-determination as being kind of the right that people talk about a lot post-DRIP. And I suppose in our conversations as UNEMRIP experts, we feel like it's been to the detriment of the right to self-determination, which is why we have a report coming up, which we encourage everybody to make submissions to on the right to self-determination. So I suppose that's been interesting in that FPIC has dominated so much of the space. And I suppose that's not necessarily a bad thing, but in some ways it has been picked up by corporations and governments, and we worry about self-determination being reduced to a procedural right, you know, a process issue, as opposed to something much more than that. So that's one thing that I've found surprising. Another thing I've found surprising in the absence of a travaux of the DRIP is a lot of non-Indigenous experts rewriting the meanings of the many, many articles that we drafted during the period of the drafting of the DRIP. And that's an important thing too, because, and certainly the mandate of the UNEMRIP helps, I suppose, address that, and certainly the very important work of the Special Rapporteur in terms of being able to put some meat on the bones of the provisions of the DRIP is really critical, because it's a unique declaration. It's a declaration that came out of, as you know, from COBO right through to all the WGIPs. It's a declaration that was drafted by the rights bearers having, you know, the same kind of status as states, and being able to draft that declaration in response to the issues we raised in the review of developments part of the WGIP's mandate. That's really significant. And so as a public international lawyer, it's frustrating to see non-Indigenous lawyers who have no connection to Indigenous communities, who are, you know, professional academics, saying things about particular provisions that they know nothing about. And so that's a really important piece of work that we need to do as Indigenous experts, I think, and as Indigenous peoples attending the UN meetings. You wanted something positive as well?
If you have any.
No, I mean, look, can I say one more bad thing?
Sure, go ahead.
The other thing that I think is worrying sometimes is that we've become accustomed to a lot of UN meetings like Permanent Forum and UNEMRIP, and we're not paying enough attention to the UN human rights treaty bodies.
100%.
And I think there's been yeah, I think there's been a real neglect of that, and that's really problematic because that's substantive law and it makes a big deal. So in terms of positive, look, the one great thing I think about the UN meetings and the UN work is what Tuomas, I think, touched upon, and that is the International Indigenous Global Movement, and that's a really powerful thing, the work that we do on that level. But in particular, the stories we share with each other about what our governments do and things that work well and things that don't work. You know, you pick up so many ideas, and for me as a constitutional lawyer, I just find it fascinating, not just as, you know, my 10 odd years as an expert, but before that, just sitting there at UN meetings and listening, you know, from 10 to 5 or 6, 10 to 6, to everybody's contributions and hearing, you know, whether it's, you know, African states or Scandinavia or, you know, Latin America, listening to the very many ways in which states accommodate and recognize Indigenous peoples within the framework of their state, but also the thing, you know, the really crappy things that happen that are going on as well. So that's a positive thing.
No, thank you so much. You talked about declaration. Article 3 is something that we keep on pushing, of course, right to self-determination. What is, in your view, the biggest challenge right now for Indigenous peoples in relation to the right to self-determination?
Oh, that's a big question. I mean, I suppose I'll touch upon part of the previous answers that I've given, and that is, look, for a long time, the UN wouldn't allow us to use language of the right to self-determination. Yeah, so we learned ways in which to adapt to that. And one way that the UNEMRIP dealt with that was to call the reports, you know, the right to participate in democratic decision-making and other things. But I do think post-DRIP, there's been kind of a real focus and emphasis on other aspects, like I've said, FPIC, and perhaps to the detriment of self-determination. We want to know now what it looks like. What does self-determination look like in the many, many countries that contain significant Indigenous populations? And that's really key, because I think we're at a stage of the DRIP where we're really wanting to put some, you know, solid meat on the bones of the declaration. You know, what does each provision really actually mean? And just because the state has a particular legislation, if there's been no Indigenous input into that, that doesn't mean that that's okay. And so there's a lot of work, I think there's a lot of work to be done around that.
All right. So, a lot of, like, the last 10 minutes, a lot of like brain candy, nuggets of a lot of things that the people can take on. Something that I really I'm thinking about is that Indigenous peoples are not doing enough outreach about their situations. I see too many press releases, too little contextual content. You're on Snapchat, you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter. Where do you stand on the use of social media?
Am I on Snapchat?
Well,
so.
Oh no, Lila is on. Lila was on Snapchat.
Oh, sorry. I think I'm only on there with my family, but so I don't think social media is to blame. I think there's been a professionalization of activism to some degree. I think that post adoption of the DRIP, and, you know, we have the permanent forum and the expert mechanism, and you have a lot of kind of you know, professional conference goers, and then you have people that are a little bit like the WGIP, like people that are desperately turning up to try and get someone to listen to their story, you know. I mean, when you look at the core of that UN work, Indigenous peoples look to the UN because their states were failing in their responsibility to them as citizens, and they were looking to these supranational institutions that had as their normative framework international human rights law, and that history is really critical. But, you know, sometimes I sit there in some of the meetings and it's really frustrating. You know, you'll see people come in, give a statement, put out that press release, do a YouTube video and leave. You know, and in the WGIP days, that never happened. People sat in the room and listened to the entire day meeting, if not the whole week meeting. And the same with the declaration. You know, it's respect for other people's and other Indigenous people's stories and narratives and the things that they're going through. So I'm not sure social media is to blame. I just think that there's a circuit. It costs a lot of money. Yeah. So the moment we moved from Geneva to New York, particularly with the forum, we left behind a lot of a lot of continents, a lot of countries that can't afford to go to New York, and also can't get visas to get into New York. And you know, like, so I think you know, on the Permanent Forum, we used to lament the lack of participation because of funding from the Pacific and also African states, and it's the same with UNEMRIP. So, which means that it becomes dominated by states that have high incomes and can afford to go to these meetings, and their issues influence the work of all the bodies. So, I'm not sure it's social media that's the problem, actually. But that's a conversation for all of the global Indigenous peoples movement to talk about and discuss, because yeah, like I said, I mean, the Indigenous meetings are important, but in terms of the further development and elaboration on our rights, we need to be focusing a lot more in the treaty bodies. And there's a lot of treaties, there's a lot of treaty bodies, and there's a lot of really important work to be done there in terms of you know, mapping out what, and that's a complex piece of work, to accept that, you know, it depends on what the treaty is and what the issue is, etc. But you're going to, you know, it's an important area of international human rights law, and it has a particular influence on states and states' legal systems in the way that UNEMRIP and Permanent Forum don't have. So, you know, social media is, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's great to see people attending things and doing things, but yeah.
No, sorry about the Snapchat thing, by the way. Final 90 seconds. Anything that we didn't touch upon that you would like to talk about? Thoughts, ideas, what comes to your mind?
Nothing at this point because it's midnight, but
sorry about that, by the way.
No. I think we're in an interesting stage. Like, we're really, I know as UNEMRIP, we're really excited about Francisco taking the role of Special Rapporteur, and we think there's a lot of work to be done by UNEMRIP and the Special Rapporteur on the elaboration of the declaration. So I think that's really very important for our people across the world. Yeah, and the only other thing is, just mention again the fact that, you know, we need a lot of we need a lot more funding directed to the Pacific and a lot of African states to kind of elevate some of the issues that they need to raise and need to be ventilated at a UN issue at a UN level that just aren't being raised at this point. So that to me is a real, you know, I know UNEMRIP and the Permanent Forum share my concerns, but that's a deep concern I have about that.
Appreciate it, Megan. Definitely we'll do a long form conversation at a point that is much more convenient for you. I know it's like late night, and on a Friday night, you're probably about to go to party, maybe, I don't know. Thank you so much.
I'm like old days.
Oh, sorry.
I'm an old lady now.
All right. Thank you so much, Megan, and we'll talk soon.
Ini,
how was that?
Wow, that's amazing. Actually, also, Professor Megan, you've seen that she's part of the rugby, into the rugby. I used to play for the national Panamanian team, so as a number 9. So it's amazing to see her and talking about all this thing. And I think I hope a lot of young people there are watching us and to see the importance of like being in this war, you know. Diplomacy.
You're number 9? I was number 9 too.
Really? We need to make maybe next time when we meet with the
we should. Yeah.
Games. So much. Yeah.
All right. Who's next?
Yes, our next guest is none other than Maiting Yu Mon. He's a young indigenous right activist from Chin community in Myanmar. She's a program director of Indigenous Peoples Development Program of Chin Human Rights Organization. She is an executive council member of Myanmar Indigenous Peoples Network. She's representing Indigenous youth to the Executive Council of Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. She's also serving as Asia focal person for Global Indigenous Youth Caucus since 2016. She has been working with indigenous communities in Myanmar and Asia for the past several years, being a part of strengthening platform for indigenous youths and indigenous women across Asia. Ghazali?
Yeah, my theme, inarguably one of the rising stars within the indigenous movement. It's see her a lot, climate change, SDGs, everywhere. She's very much wanted by a lot of UN agencies, institutions, youthfulness, strength, perspectives. So before I go and jump into the questions, my theme, give us some context, some background, the short 2-minute origin story about yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, but a little bit reluctant to accept the status of like a rising star, blah blah.
Oh, you're there already?
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. My Tinyumon, so greetings, Nadamo from Chinland, and it's really great to be here with all of you, all the people that I look up to. Our seniors and who have always like led us and who always trusted youths to hand over to. So to see all the such our indigenous leaders, to see and to speak alongside them, I feel really honored. So Maitin Yumon from Chinland. I work for Chin Human Rights Organization, and now 7 years with the organization now. So when I first joined Indigenous Peoples movement, actually I thought that I will be in this field for about 2 years, just like collecting some experience, and then I'll go further studies. I'll become some sort of like professional in some sort of interesting field. But I ended up working here for more than 7 years now, and I can't think the time I will leave this this work. Because I'm so much in love with the work that I'm doing. So I'm working, so the work, the part that I love most about my work is I get a chance to work with the people that I really represent and my people. So it's mainly like working together with people on the grassroots and like being a voice for the voiceless people. This is how I usually narrate my work, being the voice of voiceless people. So I'm representing, yeah, the moderator is introduced a lot, and yeah, I think I will continue this work for so many years.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to put a lot of fluff around it about like rising star, but just my observation, of course. And also thank you so much for being you. Question about like how much opportunity, because yeah, you are one of the, if you're not rising star, you're one of the upcoming representatives. How much opportunity do you think that the indigenous movement, the international indigenous movement, gives for the creation or training of the new leaders?
From my own experience, like you said, I'm like stepping up a bit more than like the usual youth I used to be after joining this Indigenous Peoples movement. So actually this Indigenous Peoples movement gave us, especially youths like us, so much space to grow and to learn. So the best example that from my own experiences, so we consider now as being part of these global discussions, and now being getting a chance to communicate with people who have who are going through the similar things, who are facing similar issues, and getting a chance to talk at the global level is a very big power for many Indigenous youths and many Indigenous peoples. And for example, for myself, before and after joining the international community is totally different. The impact of my work also on the ground, because the way like people accept us is like so these international mechanisms were all the different mechanisms, like starting from the UNPFII, like UNEMRIP, and many other, also at the regional level. So for example, looking at the climate change, for us, youths, it's like a very far away space to go in and talk, but due to this Indigenous Peoples movement, then even like very young Indigenous representatives get a chance to go as observers and to participate in these negotiations, and sometimes even with these state representatives. So it gives us the being in the process itself, I think, is a sort of empowerment for many of us. So this also gives us energy to influence many discussions, negotiations that we're having back in the country. So this international Indigenous Peoples movement has, how should I say, has empowered us to be influential in the local level. So this is what I see. So I think this is not only for the youths, but also for different levels. And even in the regional level, what we are doing right now is like, we have regional platforms. So sometimes international platforms are very like broad, and sometimes it takes so much energy and so much effort to be a part of them. But we also have regional ones where the Indigenous Peoples movement can clearly be seen, and the impacts also. So I think, yes, Indigenous Peoples movement has given us so much space and opportunity for many Indigenous peoples.
Can I, because you're also involved in, for example, IFAD. You're very familiar in the processes. Anything going on in there that you want Indigenous peoples to think about, or talk about, or start working with?
Yes. So I myself, I am the steering committee member of IFAD's Indigenous Peoples Forum. So IFAD is an international fund for agriculture development. Many people already know, but I would like to introduce a little bit, because it's a funding agency, a UN specialized agency, which mostly handle funding, which gives loans and grants to states and development agencies who are working in their mandated area. So IFAD, what is interesting in IFAD is that it has its own Indigenous Peoples Forum, which happens every 2 years in Rome, starting in 2011 as a result of the recommendations by the Indigenous leaders to have an institutionalized mechanism within IFAD to engage with its operations, because IFAD has operations all around the world, right? So with all its operations in Indigenous territories. So IFAD gives a space and a mechanism for us to directly intervene the projects funded by IFAD that are operating in our respective countries. They also have a policy on engagement with Indigenous peoples. And another facility that I think it's important for Indigenous peoples to know is Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility, which is usually called IPAF. So it is a sort of grant mechanism for Indigenous grassroots organizations to apply, mainly for agriculture related things. So they provide at least 35 projects every cycle. So I think it's really worth trying for Indigenous peoples, because they directly they directly support Indigenous people's livelihoods on the ground. Not only funding, but also technical assistance they are giving. So what I think I really want to highlight is that it's really important for us to use the existing mechanism, because what we are seeing right now is also we have, for example, in each region, there are 3 representatives from steering committee. But what we are seeing is like sometimes there are communication gaps, and we are not effectively applying the mechanism that IFAD has. Actually, IFAD didn't create, but Indigenous peoples insisted that this is the mechanism is created. So I think it's really important for us to really apply the opportunity and try to intervene, because these loans that they usually give to states are not really like small amounts. For example, they are really, really big millions numbers. So I think it's really important, because this is also very much related to land grabbing, because states usually use these grants and these loans to really extend their government activities in Indigenous peoples areas, which usually causes more land grabbing. So I think it's really important to use all these mechanisms that exist. Yeah.
I have maybe a slight personal question. You don't have to answer it if you don't like to. What at least from my experience, what I really needed what I had actually when I was growing up into the movement was like a group or people that I listened to, like a mentor group. Do you have something like that? Do you have a mentor or a group of people that listen to? And yeah, give a little bit more context about, if so, how that manifested and how it manifests in this time.
Yes, I do have a group of a number of mentors. But not like permanent, like a fixed set of people, but
sure,
from time to time, what I always do is like open myself to get new learnings. But at the same time, you know, when I first joined this movement, I was really overwhelmed, because like as you just said, like the demands also increasing, and I increasingly feel that I need to be everywhere. Like I need to be in the village, I need to be in the community. At the same time, I need to, this policy, state policy will have an impact on Indigenous peoples, and this meeting will happen, and the international negotiations are going on. So many things. So there were times that I felt like I needed rest, or I need someone who will tell me, you need to consider doing this. This is more important. And like that, we always need a group of people who will show us the light, and who will help us not to lose sight of what our original aims and what are the most our priorities, right? So the first group of mentors when I joined this movement was my senior colleagues, because they have been in this negotiation process. They were a part of drafting this UNDRIP, and so they already had so much experience in that, and they were the first group of people who mentored me. And then when I met more people, I think I can't even count all my mentors, because some we meet very short time, but I do so much learning from them. So yeah, I do have a group of mentors, and some are in this group, in the speakers, and they know themselves, I'm sure. Yeah, so yeah.
It's good, so that people that that would like to get into the movement, that they know that it can be overwhelming. You know, there's a lot of noise, and you have to be able to listen to the signal. And having a mentor group is can be very helpful. Mythene, your vision. Where do you see yourself in 8 to 10 years in the movement? If not in the movement, what do you see?
I'm sure I will still be in the movement, but the way I engage myself would there will be a big change, I'm sure, because also of due to because many of the changes that I really want to drive is at the many things need to start at the local level and at the national level, and sometimes it's like vice versa. Some changes we need to do at the international level, and for example, climate change actions and all these things. It's always good to start the negotiations at the international level, which can have a very good and big influence at all the implementations at the national level. But I'm also starting to see many things that I need to start doing from the local level and at the national level. And I can see myself now I'm also doing some preparation to be in the policy making, like representing my peoples, and I might be in maybe starting in next 5 years. I plan to be into party politics and then to run election to represent my people more effectively in the in this policy making platform. But I will still that one is also a way of being in the movement, because there are many things that we need to drive because we Myanmar are a very young like we are only like 5 years old democracy. So we are the political landscape it demands that we are there to so that our voice be heard and be reflected in all the lawmaking process. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Martine. Last 60 seconds, anything that you want to talk about, something that we forgot to talk about, something that you want to share, maybe? Because definitely, whenever you're going to do the political work, we will help you. As the mentors, I'm sure will help you out as well. Yeah, anything that you still want to share that I forgot to?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's always the learning and the solidarity that we have among ourselves, whatever we are in our own local community, or when we go to these international spaces where it's the most important thing for us is to connect what is really happening on the ground to what we are discussing at the international level. So I see myself more as a bridge for right now to connecting all these things, discussions happening at the international level and the reality on the ground. So I think this is something that I would like to do also more in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much for being with us. And I know it's late over there, so I'll let you go. Ini, how was that? What do you think?
Well, I am amazed, man. What that's like, I can say what she has done at her age, and what she said about consider that we are being considering part of a global discussion, the youth in regional. And well, I would like to stay with the word bridge, to be a bridge between the communities and the diplomacy and everything, to bring and to both ways what's going on in the different side. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. All right, who's next? Who have we lined up? I'm getting fired up now.
Yes. Please welcome Raya Devasish Roy. Is the first hereditary Raja or chief of the indigenous Chakma nation. He heads the administrative territory of the Chakma circle in the Chittagong Hill Tracts region in Bangladesh. However, he maintains close ties with Chakmas living in neighboring India and Myanmar, where the other half of the estimate 900,000 Chakmas live. Roy is a London-trained barrister involved in pro bono work in the Supreme Court of Bangladesh. He was a minister in an interim national administration and served 2 terms as a member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. He was involved closely in helping draft several instruments and other documents on indigenous peoples' rights at the UN and in other international fora. Ghazali.
Thank you so much, Ini. If we talk about building bridges, Raja Davies Roy, he's all about building bridges, because that's like if you look at it, the way he writes, the way he talks, he's all about building those bridges from the local to the international. Raja Dev, sorry, I'll interchange a little bit. Or how do you want me to address you, first and foremost? Hold on. Where is he?
My mic was off. Yes,
Yep,
Dev is
you're
fine,
on.
Devashish is fine. Yeah.
Oh, Davies, all right. Dev, probably like the $1 million question right now. If you talk about global indigenous governance, diplomacy in the now, rights during times like these, there's a thirst for certainty. And what is, in your view, the easiest tangible positive impact that can be made in our communities, and maybe also on the international community? And any thoughts on that?
Well, thanks very much. Good to be with you guys. Well, the last 2 months plus I've been working. I'm even busier now than I was before Corona. And the reason is we are monitoring, one is how much relief the government and others are giving. Two, what are we doing about food security, food sovereignty, shifting cultivation, which is not market oriented, but you grow everything in your Sweden fields. And I think one thing tangible that is strong is coming is that we are revitalizing our food security, customs, practices, that we are encouraging people to go for diverse agriculture as we did. Our ancestors did. We were all shipping cultivators as humans, people across the border in Myanmar as well. The other thing is we have a custom which in my Chakma language is called Malaya. It means if one villager needs support to harvest the rice or repair the roof, and you're perhaps a widow and you don't have enough farm hands, you call Malaya. So I think now that here in COVID times, people are coming forward. We have ancient traditions of quarantine, believe it or not. We don't even have a term named quarantine, but we know what it is. We have certain diseases, villages are cut off, locked down. We have ancient traditions on food sharing, and which is very, very important, because in some of the remotest corners of our Chakma territory and the Chittagong Hill tracts, it takes you 20-something hours of walking on foot to the market. Sometimes it's more than 2 days walking, that remote, perhaps Humon's Chin land as well. So, and here I think our indigenous traditions that are being revitalized now, our youth are coming forward, guys like you. It's lovely to see you young people out there, where we were 20 years ago. And I think I see a lot of positive things coming out of also the current COVID crisis, and which we can bring on both at the local level, but also at the international level by showcasing our indigenous traditions, which are as relevant for COVID as for climate change, for biodiversity and sustainable development.
Thank you so much, Dev. Like I said, my first word association with you is building bridges. As a hereditary chief, how do you communicate or bridge solutions from your peoples to the outside world? How do you do it? What is your mindset?
Well, firstly, my job as a chief is to also supervise the work of the other sub-chiefs, if you like. My territory has more than 2,000 villages. So there are 2,000 village chiefs whose work I have to monitor, along with the other government authorities, elected leaders, and the civil bureaucrats and all that. And for me, one thing that we found is that in building bridges, what we have to do is get everybody's voice on board. Now, we had a tradition of only men could become chiefs, including paramount chiefs of our position. But we have been working for the last 10 plus years in my territory. We now have 300 women's village chiefs, as against, well, men are still more, 20,000. But the thing is that I think the important thing is that you have to give respect to everybody's opinion, and you have to help facilitate people's voices, as many people have said today also too. I'm amazed to hear these stories from all over the world, where the job of a leader is not to be just sitting down and, have the power. Your job is actually to be a spokesperson to articulate where they are not in a position to do if in front of your government, or there are the bilateral missions that come, like the U.S. government, the British government, or the donor agencies, the World Bank and Asian Development Bank has projects, in our region. So I think the important thing is that you must not pretend you know everything or even think you know everything, but you listen carefully and then try to put that in the language of development that government and UN agencies and others understand. So for me, the bridging is that understanding the both two different worlds, but also being able to enter each world and engage with them in their own terminology without giving up your principles and what is your sort of understanding of your people's rights and development.
Such an amazing mindset. Question that comes to mind is, you heard about Maithi Newman, Carson, Tuomas, all leaders in their own right, very young as well. Any idea or to help them or others to move into the rights movement? What's your personal, I wish I had known this when I was starting in the movement? There could be a lot, but maybe there's one thing that could come out.
Well, I don't know. Well, these Carson, Tuomas, and you too. I mean, you guys could be my mentors in certain fields as well. It's not that, it's like the older guys have the knowledge and young guys no. And that's why I have met you, Ghazali, for example, you more, 15 years ago. And I, for one, have always had faith on the youth. In fact, if you ask me, what is it that I should have known? I think my first thing would be that, one, I believe in that thing, the early years of the real, it says people lead, leaders will follow. I do not believe in charismatic one person, one few elders leading the whole nation or the entire world. I don't believe in it. I believe in middle rank leaders, that there are lots of leaders who sit, have a consensus like the Indigenous people believe in, and then work on it. So I think if anything, I really don't have any message that you guys probably need, anybody for that matter, but I think it's that always give a good ear to everybody. And here, I think in some indigenous traditions, we sometimes can be a little gender blind. We can sometimes be too much for older men, especially men could be women with gray hair, having all the knowledge, and the young people not knowing anything. So I think here that we can learn from both the worlds that we guys, all of us engage in, our own traditional tribal world, indigenous world, as well as the world of Geneva and New York, and then see where we can learn good things from each other, whoever it is, indigenous or non-indigenous. But of course, asserting our indigenous traditions as something which is as relevant, that calls for a little bit of articulation. And if we are savvy at that, then we can show to the rest of the world so many, many things that we have answers to, not just for indigenous people, as in the climate change, biodiversity, environment world, we have already shown. And I think we can still keep on showing those things.
Okay. Talk a little bit about that. What do you see in and also like moving it also like into like the current context, COVID-19 pandemic? What do you see in how COVID has shaped or influenced Indigenous governance, or what do you expect to see? Maybe that's also something interesting to talk about.
But COVID has brought in pluses and minuses. As I said, the pluses was we are revitalizing some of those traditions of quarantine and self-help, community help. But the minuses are many indigenous persons working in the cities are now unemployed. They have come back. Then again, it's only people who can in the virtual world whose communication, there are places in our region where we can't even get a mobile phone, let alone enough bandwidth to have a Zoom conversation. So that is one side that we need to remember, although, as I said, as Megan, I agree with her that the social media, by the way, I don't have Twitter. I am thinking of having a page. I didn't even know the difference between a Facebook profile and a page. And I am only learning it the last, my wife is younger than me. She had learned, and then I have a nephew. And so I learn these things. So I will probably go on Twitter and Facebook page soon. I'm learning. So anyway, my point is that those negative and positives are there, but if we are, remember who is the most disadvantaged, who is the most marginalized amongst us. And so in COVID times and in post-COVID times, like food security is a huge, huge problem. There's discrimination. There's discrimination not because they hate us only, the government or the greater mainstream society. They don't even understand how long it takes for us. I was telling the other day with somebody on a development agenda that communities who live more than 4 hours from the nearest market, it costs them something like 30 cents more per kilo of rice. That's a lot. It's like, so these are the things that we need to keep in mind. I think engage by keeping the most disadvantaged communities, groups, and individuals in our society, including persons with disability, etc. And I was very surprised to come up on yesterday in a customary law meeting. We are having this because we guys, we do justice. We have our own tribal courts at village to certain territorial level, and we do minor criminal law and all personal law for us, like inheritance, family, marriage, divorce, child custody. So and one tribal person was saying, we have also these traditions where in inheritance sometimes you give a priority to a person with disability, like you give a priority to the sibling, a greater share of the landed property, who looks after the parents till they are deaf. So there are many things that tribal customary law brings, and that is another thing that I want to also bring to you friends out there and to everybody, which is that when indigenous peoples engage with the rest of the world, in some spheres we engage from a position of strength and advantage as opposed to disadvantage, which is customary law. And as I say, most laws are either created by the creator or by the state, the Austinian definition of law being the command of the sovereign. Customary law is one thing that is created by the community. It does not need a parliament to pass. And therefore, I always urge my people, don't go for codification. This is something we can turn around to our needs, and don't be so arrogant to think that you can legislate in 2020 and know what's good for the my Chakma people or whoever, and stop the thing because you have to go to parliament to change one little thing of the law. So leave it to the people to be sovereign. Do not trust the state, and certainly not the market.
Wow! Such powerful words. Governance, diplomacy. What role does, in your view, indigenous diplomacy play, or has changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID? Any thoughts on that?
I think the limited space that the virtual world, social media is offering, especially with all the lockdowns and quarantines and so forth. I think indigenous peoples are learning to be more articulate. I have been joining virtual meetings like the Zoom and Jitsi. Apparently Jitsi has even less risk of anybody spying on you and hurting. We do that more often here. Whenever we can, the internet. I might lose the electricity any minute, by the way. So I think that people are learning to be articulate, and I was listening, fascinated to many people, including young persons, taking advantage of the, during this time of showing how strategic they can be, indigenous persons, young persons, strategic they can be in trying to, deal with, overcome COVID and provide, food security and whatever, and less discrimination or deal with discrimination against indigenous people, whether it's substantive or it's actually ailment, doesn't matter, but it hurts us to not get the rations on time, not get not be able to do tests for COVID and get a result till 7, 8 days, 10 days. So these are the things I think I am quite happy to see the present day leadership in my country as well across the world.
Dev, final 90 seconds. Anything that you still want to share with the people that we did not touch upon? I know there's many, but what comes to your mind? Oh, there it goes.
No, nothing very much, but one thing I'd say is I agree with Megan as to the engagement for Indigenous people right at the international level with the treaty bodies. I've said that even 15 years ago, asking IFGA and all, don't get us all in the permanent forum, and then there was no UNEMRIP. I said, your friends start clapping before you even finished your speech, because you know that before you came to Geneva and New York. I said, it's more important to go to the Human Rights Committee, the Committee of Economic and Social Rights. That's one. And the other point I would like to make is that SDGs are great too. They're still there for I don't know how many years, another 8, 10, 12 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's try to make our national laws and positive indigenous appropriate, indigenous contextual, so that then we can get, because SDGs, we have the opportunity of it being a qualitative change, and we can't even leave one person behind, one indigenous person behind. So I'll end with that. And one indigenous leader, he was a pastor, I think, from the Garo people. He told the audience of Bangladeshi, Bengali-speaking majority people, I said, you know, when you do namaskar, namaste, you know, whatever, different languages, sawadee, the first thing that comes out on your hand is your little finger. And we indigenous people are the little fingers of the nation and country. So if you don't give us the development, the rest of the country, world will see your little finger, or small little finger. So I was amazed by that leader's speech. And so I think that we have to keep on encouraging our non-indigenous friends in the countries we live in. And we have to engage. I'm glad you're on. Good luck to your parliamentarian and whatever. And all you guys, thanks very much, Ghazali. And our colleague, I can't pronounce his name properly, Inkilipi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dev. Definitely we'll have to talk another time, much more longer, because you have so much knowledge, and definitely very good to record that in like one-on-one conversation. But like I can feel that we can definitely talk for like 2 or 3 hours. So please, thank you so much. Ini.
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, that's really amazing to hear that phrases, I can say. Starting, I would like to keep what he said about understanding the Gulf War, to live it, but not forgetting what we are. So it's important for the young people who are listening to us. Well, Ghazali, our next guest is Mr. Francisco Calitzai. He is Maya Cachical from Guatemala, with experience in defending the rights of indigenous peoples, both in Guatemala and at the level of the United Nations and the OAS. He was Director of Human Rights at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. He was a member of the Presidential Commission Against Discrimination and Racism Against Indigenous Peoples in Guatemala, and President of the National Reparation Program for Victims of the Internal Armed Conflict. He was Ambassador of Guatemala to the Federal Republic of Germany, and was President of the Committee for the Elimination to All Forms of Racial Discrimination, a treaty body from which he was elected for 4 consecutive periods of 4 years each. He's currently the Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples. Ghazali?
Yes, I would almost say like royalty in the house, but like worked a lot with Pancho. Also, like we full disclosure, Pancho was the president of the board of directors of IATC. I worked a lot with IATC, so that's how I got to know Pancho a lot, and very thrilled to see him as a special rapporteur. Given his track record, it is endless. aside from everyone's that has been talking today as well. Welcome, Pancho. Very good to have you in. Let's start off with giving you like, all right, so 2 minutes or 3. What are you seeing out there in your role as special rapporteur? How are you thinking? How are you feeling about this Indigenous peoples and COVID-19?
Well, thank you very much, Ghazali. I have problem with my internet, and I was just here that you are introducing myself there, or you are introducing me to the audience. So I appreciate your words, and actually, I see the situation in this moment very difficult. I think that we have to adaptate ourselves to the new, we can say, to the new age of technology as we are doing in this moment, because this kind of conferences that we are used to do is physically being together all, or gathering together all in a room. The good thing of this way of communication is that now we are bringing the information and also the conference to more people than we used to do before. So what I'm seeing on my work in COVID-19 is that as you probably know, is that the Special Report on Indigenous Peoples' Rights is the least financed work in the United Nations. Now we are facing more difficulties to have that financiation to the work of the Special Rapporteur. And the thing is that I am seeing that also that Indigenous people, they are showing their support, their solidarity, and also they're willing to help to fulfill my work as a special rapporteur. I think that is very important to highlight it, because in this moment of world problem that we are facing, Indigenous people again, they are coming to show that there is a possibility to overcome, and the way to overcome is the solidarity and community work.
Thank you. And also, sorry, because it's very early in the morning, so it's very much very thankful, very appreciative that you get up early to be live in the show. So thank you so much. What it's because I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit about your new role as a special rapporteur, and more like on a personal level. What inspires you, and what petrifies you? Like, what were you afraid of about when you became, about the prospect of becoming a special rapporteur?
Well, actually, I was, you know that I was 16 years in the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination.
Yes.
I was thinking to stop my participation on that level, because it's very, you know, that is the work in the United Nations, if you wanted to do it 100% as your work, you can do it. The problem with being in the treaty bodies and also as a special rapporteur is that this work is an honorarium way of work. So that last year when I thought that 16 years was enough for me, I was thinking just to leave United Nations work and to go into do my personal professional work in my former work that I had in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. But you know that some of the indigenous leaders, international indigenous leaders, they approached me. Even Tuomas also was one of the people, especially the Sami parliament. They were one of the organization, IITC, and also the Pacific indigenous Pacific. Now I don't remember, I'm sorry for this, but they approached me and they told me, look, we are not going to leave you. You have a good experience in the United Nations. So now we are going to propose you as a candidate to be a special rapporteur. The fear that I had is not a fear. It's something like sometimes you are not sure on yourself, especially because I have a handicap side of my on me, and it's the academic preparation, the academic studies. As you probably know, also is that when I got into the committee for the elimination of racial against racial discrimination, I didn't have my high school, and when I was almost 2 years as a member of the committee, I decided to go back to formal studies or formal education. Finally, I ended my high school, and immediately I decided to go to the university, and I study law. But for all the situation that we were living here in Guatemala, and also because my work had asking me I have to use too much of my time. I was not able to make my professional exam to be a lawyer. So I finished all my law school, but I am not a lawyer. Still, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to do it. So when I saw all the other candidates, we were 12 candidates. When I saw the other candidates, I saw that they were very good, prepared in academic way. And the thing is that when I passed to the second stage of the in the election, I was surprised, and I said, well, if I am in the second stage, I have a good opportunity, because what I'm seeing is that they are looking on my experience and my commitment on the defense of the indigenous people's right. So that was in the beginning, but in the second and the third stage, I was sure on that. And the thing is that what I was afraid is that especially if I will receive the support of the indigenous people organization. And now I can tell you that I have been receiving a very good messages from almost, I cannot say all the indigenous organizations, but for the majority of the indigenous people organization, I have been receiving a very good responses and a very good messages of supporting my work.
Yeah, definitely. I can very much attest to the very supportive messages. I've also seen them going around. Pancho, just a question about, yeah, maybe now as a special rapporteur, and we'll talk about the CERT membership in a little bit. First, we had Rosa Stavenhagen, James Anaya, Vicky Telecorpus, now you. What is I would say, like, the special sauce that the special ingredient that Pancho brings to the special rapporteur role?
Well, probably,
what have you learned? Or yeah, I don't know.
Well, I learned a lot from the three of them. They are the three of them. They are very professional special rapporteurs. They have their own specialties. Stavenhagen, he had his specialization was land. Jim, he's a lawyer. He is very good on all the legal issues, especially. And Vicky, well, she also had a very good background, especially as an activist. So she make a very good work on that. And I think that what I wanted to do is to strengthening the knowledge on the Declaration of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights, especially because when the Special Rapporteur figure was created in 20 years ago, 19 years ago, we were thinking to create the figure of the Special Rapporteur to have one institution that is going to take care on the implementation of the declaration. Why I'm saying this? Because there were only two persons who prepared the draft resolution to create this figure, and was Mario Ibarra, is a Mapuche from Chile, and myself. There were not any other people. Of course, we were supported by IITC on those days. I was the vice chair of the IITC 19 years ago. So the only two of us, we were discussing among ourselves there because there were not other indigenous person participating in the Commission of Human Rights. So we were there together. We were discussing what else is going that we need to create if we wanted to implement the Declaration of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights. And that year also we were discussing in the Indigenous Caucus the issue of the creation of the permanent forum. I remember that when we presented the draft resolution to some of the permanent representatives, they told us, look, you are crazy because you have already, you have almost already the permanent forum. And now you wanted to create another figure. You are just crazy because you know that you are not going to be able to have this figure. But we insisted 20 years ago, and was 19 years ago when the Human Rights Commission adopted the resolution. So what I wanted to do, especially in this moment, is to see that the Declaration of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights is fulfilled by all states. But the thing is that the COVID-19, what I'm seeing is that is putting in danger that implementation, because the free, prior, and informed consent has been put aside by the enterprises, by the states, taking advantage of the curfew and the special measure that they are taking to prevent the spreading of COVID-19. So I think that probably that is going to be my, as you say, my sauce of pancho sauce.
Pancho sauce.
on the work of the special rapporteur.
I don't think that's, I would like to unpack that a little bit. What you see, like the effects of COVID, like shaping the indigenous rights enjoyment of indigenous peoples, the rights of indigenous people, sorry. What do you see? And like what, I know that you also have started a questionnaire. Maybe you can also talk a little bit about that, if you can.
Well, actually, you know that we are preparing the report. We are going, we have deadlines to send to the General Assembly and to the Human Rights Council. And I can say in general that what I'm seeing is how indigenous people have been able to support themselves to prevent the spreading of COVID-19, especially where indigenous people have the control of their self-determination, the self-government, or the autonomy, as many other people they are saying. I know that autonomy is only one aspect of self-determination. And the thing is that where indigenous people have control of their territories, what I'm seeing in the report is where they have been able to confront the spreading of COVID-19. But and also they have been showing solidarity not only among indigenous people but among other communities that are not indigenous people, especially sharing their food that they are producing in their communities with other communities that are not indigenous people. But also what I'm seeing in the report is that it's not that they are the state, they are not attending the indigenous people and health services. The thing is that COVID-19 just took out the cover that they have put it on the reality of indigenous people. COVID-19, what is really is bringing to the world is the reality that the unjust system that indigenous people have been living, especially because they don't have health services, because they don't have, they had not been able to, as Davies was mentioning, even that indigenous people, they have been secure their food. If we talk about a general policy or the national policy, they have not securing food for indigenous people. There is a lack of data on how many indigenous people have been affected by COVID-19. Also the migrant people, majority are indigenous people, and they are not, that we don't have a data specific for indigenous people. Also, there are the growing of the criminalization of the work of indigenous peoples defending their rights. There is growing in this moment, and we are seeing how the increasing of violence against indigenous communities, against indigenous leaders, has been, as I was saying, is growing in this moment. So I think that COVID-19 in this moment is affecting not only as a illness, but also as a political effects, economical effect, social and cultural effects to indigenous peoples.
Sure, thank you so much, Pancho. Final thoughts, what have we not touched upon that you're proud of or curious about or want indigenous peoples to think about?
Well, actually, I think that it's not that you have not touching with in general, but in my conversation you have not touched on this issue, and is how you being able to gather all the leadership that is participating in this moment, because the governance of indigenous people is that the combination of the capability that the indigenous leadership had, and also the capability that the elders can give the knowledge to youth, and how youth are helping elders to manage technology, because that is one of the things that we are not used to use technology. I remember on my days in the United Nations in Geneva, writing in telegraphs, I think it's called in English, and telefax. I'm sorry that you have to write everything first, and then you have to put it just bind into the machine, and then they are going to receive the fax in the other side. So now with this technology, it's amazing how we can communicate and how we can show solidarity to indigenous peoples.
Thank you so much, Pancho. I know that that's 15 minutes is not enough time for you, but appreciate you coming in this early, and hopefully that we can have like a longer conversation in the future, and hopefully that you can stick around because Laila is after this and she might.
Yeah, no, thank you very much to you, and I will be here.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Ini.
Yes, it's amazing to hear the story and everything that he has done. Wow, that's amazing, man. Yeah, our next guest is Laila Susan Bars. Laila is a Sami a human rights lawyer from the North Sami area in northern Norway. She is the chair of the UN Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. She is also the president of the Sami University. She holds a PhD in international law, and she is the former vice president of the Sami Parliament in Norway and former research director of the Norwegian National Human Rights Institution. She belongs to a Sami family who have lived of traditional Sami livelihoods, such as reindeer herding and hunting, fishing, and gathering for generations. North Sami language is her native language. So, Ghazali, please welcome our guest.
Thank you so much, Ini. Yes, Laila is on now. I was hoping that after this we could see Grand Chief Littlechild, but he has not come on yet. So we'll wait for him. Well, hopefully that he comes in while Laila comes. We'll do the segment with Laila. Laila, congratulations, Chair Expert Mechanism. Must be thrilled. How are you doing?
Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night to some of you. Very nice to see you all. Greetings from the Sami territory here in Norway. Thank you so much, Ghazali. It's a true honor for me to become the next chair of UNEMRIP, and I'm totally into the work now. I have been working on proposals to the Human Rights Council for the past weeks, and now I'm really starting to feel how it is to be a chair of UNEMRIP. So it's a lot of work, I can assure you that. And it's been some wonderful days, also meeting with Francisco, Special Rapporteur, very nice to see you, and the Permanent Forum members. So it's been a very hectic week, but it's a true honor to be chair of UNEMRIP, for sure.
Laila, you're also like president, you're at the helm of the Sami University. We talked about a little bit with Pancho about special sauce and ingredients, so I'll keep using that word in here as well. Sorry about that. What is what is your special sauce or ingredient to Indigenous research and higher education? And what is like, tell me a little bit about the mindset that you would like to transfer to your students.
Well, the Sami University, for those of you who don't know our institution, it's the only Sami university in the whole world. At our university, it's a majority of Sami-speaking students, and our administrative and academic language is the Sami language. And that's quite unique, also in a global context. I'm the president and also the chair of the board of the institution. And for me, it's important that to make sure that the young people that are students at our university, that they are very much grounded in their own communities, that they have, you know, they are reindeer herders, they belong to families who have been doing hunting and gathering for generations. They come from small Sami communities, but they also come from urban city environments. A lot of Sami are moving into cities, as other indigenous peoples are too. So that means that our societies are changing, and these youth who are very much our future, they come here to get their teacher's education or to have training in reindeer herding, bachelor degree, to get some sort of academic foundation for their work. And for me, it's very important that they continue doing the traditional work at the same time as they do the academic work at our university. So I very much always, when I do some mentoring of students, I always tell them to remember the legacy of their ancestors. You cannot fully understand the international indigenous movement. You cannot fully understand the fight for equal rights in all the regions of the world if you don't understand kind of where your own people is coming from and the struggles of your own people. So for me, it's very important that they have stand with 1 foot very firmly on the ground in their own community, and then the other feet can be in the international arena, in the academic world, whatever. The opportunities are so many for young people. So it's very important for me to remind them all that they're very privileged, as we live in a part of the world where that it's peaceful, that we don't have to they can, and they also have the right to education here. So compared to many other peoples, they are really privileged.
So all right, so I'm going to jump from question to question in my mind now. Let's talk about governance, because it's the theme of this whole series, of course, governance and diplomacy. Let's zoom in on governance. Right now, what we see is top down. World is going reverse a little bit. Let's talk about political processes. Do you feel that they have to go the same, as in the reverse, or the opposite, or any other ideas on the topic of indigenous political processes for the now?
Well, that's a question that could potentially be a question to answer in 5 or 6 PhDs. So it's not easy for me to answer that, but I will try. I come also from a political environment. I've been into politics for 8 years as a member of the Sami parliament in Norway. I often see that, well, it is often the problem is that many of these political processes are not initiated by indigenous peoples themselves, that indigenous peoples are doing what Tuomas mentioned. They're working on multiple levels. They're trying to follow all these consultation processes, all of these different development projects happening in their traditional lands, and they're trying to do so many things at the same time, and I see that in politics some sort of consultation fatigue, that a lot of indigenous politicians are actually so preoccupied by consultations, negotiations, following all these processes when it comes to climate change, when it comes to green colonization, as we call it, development projects, as states call it. So what happens is that we have little resources, and this is probably the same situation for many indigenous peoples who are in politics, that you have little resources, you have a few politicians that have the capacity to work on many levels, and you you're drawn into that never-ending process kind of daily life where you kind of lose focus on rights, on the fundamental issues. You start running from meeting to meeting, and then you kind of lose sight of what you really should be doing. And that is a big challenge when it comes to indigenous politics. I think we are really lucky that we have youth like yourself and many other who engage on so many levels and use all the tools that are available for us in politics and also in law. We have the declaration, and we should use it like actively, both on local, national, regional, and international level. So what I always try to, at least if someone asks my advice, I always say that you need to maybe, as a politician, to focus on some things. You cannot, it's not possible to attend all meetings and be able to address all of these different processes in a good way. So it's a lot of worrying things happening in politics. I see, for instance, here in the North, I can give you some examples when it comes to the High North policies, when they're being developed by the Nordic countries and other countries that have interests here up in the north. There are many, many countries in the world who have interests in the natural resources in indigenous areas in the north. Many of those documents, the policies that are developed, are done without the consent of the indigenous peoples, who are the traditional owners of the land and who also live here and don't have the at least I'm very disappointed by the way that these policies are being made, that there's so little involvement on the grassroots level from the indigenous societies, and there's so little knowledge in indigenous societies about what the state is planning on different kind of development projects. So that is kind of a huge challenge when it comes to indigenous politics, that we should be able to partner up, to be able to sit at the same table as state representatives and to discuss these all these future projects that is affecting our communities very much. So I kind of feel that there's this power imbalance in politics that's still very much there, and that the Sami and other indigenous peoples here in the north are considered as stakeholders, or maybe even just interests, not like real people with a right to self-determination.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. And I hate, because the governance, I also have a thought about diplomacy, but it is, I think definitely, like, hopefully that you have time to go into a longer conversation so that we can unpack that a little bit more. Experiences as an UNEMRIP member, any ideas or thoughts about indigenous diplomacy in a traditional environment, so before COVID, and digital environment? What do you find wins in digital, and what do you find wins in traditional?
Many of the panelists have already mentioned that. I think we all see that there are some positive things by this new situation, that we are able to meet in virtual meetings and able to discuss. The possibility was there before COVID, but it seems like people are getting really really finding new ways of keeping in touch, and also for the UNEMRIP, the expert mechanism, we do have these virtual meetings. We had all of our pre-session as a virtual meeting, and adopted our reports and studies. So I find it quite it's quite positive that we still can carry on with our mandate through this crisis, the global crisis that we're in. A negative thing is, of course, I would love to be in Geneva and in New York and do the diplomacy in the traditional way, and to meet with indigenous organizations, leaders, state representatives. To be able to meet in person is always a good thing, because you're in that environment and you kind of have the opportunity to gather people also in different kind of settings in Geneva. So of course that would be what I would prefer, is to have physical meetings, but let's see what happens this spring. We have just adopted our recommendations, our proposals to the Human Rights Council, and I'm hoping for the opportunity to be able to go in person and to present them to the council in September, but we still don't know. So we're kind of waiting for
hopefully the UNEMRIP, as it's scheduled right now, proposed schedule, will be the first big UN indigenous meeting at the UN. So let's cross our fingers for that. You're a UNEMRIP member, chair right now. Again, congratulations. Indigenous, talk to me about indigenous women in governance, diplomacy. Any perspectives, ideas, or insights you'd like to share?
Well, for those of you who have followed these processes with the drafting of the declaration and the establishment of the expert mechanism, you all know that there's always been those strong indigenous women as a part of that process. Although that the expert mechanism for some period was only men, and I see my dear friend Willie Littlechild now joining us, and he was one of the former members in a period where there were a lot of men in the expert mechanism. I find it very important, and that was also I heard from the process of choosing new members to the expert mechanism that the Human Rights Council very much highlighted the need to get Indigenous women into this body. And I always think that we should have Indigenous youth, we should have elders, we should have men and women participating, because it brings these new perspectives into any discussion. So I find in our communities, there is a tendency though that Indigenous women are the ones who are highly educated. They do the academic work, and then many of the Sami young men, they turn to traditional livelihoods, and they are not as eager as Tuomas Aslak to engage into international work and politics. So that is actually, we have a reverse kind of situation in our communities, that we try to encourage young men to also take higher education, join the international processes, and to kind of join the diplomatic work of the Indigenous movement. So in our communities, there is this a quite different challenge than you have in other Indigenous communities. And there are so many processes, I mean. So I see also the climate change process, the International Decade of Indigenous Languages that is coming up. So we have a lot of spaces to fill with all these brilliant people that we have. And I do hope that people remember to always have that kind of balance when it comes to representation, that it also youth, women, elders are given the space on those platforms.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laila. Any final thoughts? No, not final thoughts, but like things that we did not touch upon that you really want to talk about, like for the next 90 seconds, 2 minutes.
No, I'm just very thankful that you have started with these conversations. I think we need them, and I'm just reminding everybody that the expert mechanism has adopted our land rights study, and I thank everybody who has given input to that study. And I can also announce for you that the 2022 study of UNEMRIP is also decided, and it will be a follow-up study on land rights, where we hopefully also can bring to the table some of the experiences after COVID, that we see a lot of really worrying situations in different Indigenous peoples areas concerning land rights after COVID, and caused by different kind of processes that is caused by COVID. And so I urge you all to start already think about giving your input to the 2022 study of UNEMRIP, and to give us those examples that we need in order to have a really good report on land rights also in 2022.
Okay. Thank you so much, Laila, for your time. I know you're busy. Very much appreciated. And yeah, I don't know, like this has been a stellar lineup already. Ini, what do you think about like Laila's contributions?
Well, what can I say? From academic point of view, also, and from the communities, having that two things point of view and the realities that we have. I'm pretty sure there are so many questions. Me personally, I will watch YouTube again after that to stay like to write and everything, because it's amazing that the guests that we have. And Laila, thank you very much for this, Sally.
Well, how about introducing the next? Should we? Do you want to introduce? Yeah, you'll introduce it.
Yes, yeah, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Willie Littlechild, International Chief for Treaties number 6, 7, and 8, member of the Ermineskin Cree Nation, former rapporteur of the UN Permanent Forum for 6 years, and first two-time chairperson rapporteur for UNEMRIP during 2 terms, former member of parliament and vice president of the Indigenous Parliament of the Americas, member of the Order of Canada, 8 Sport Halls of Fame, including Canada's Sport Hall of Fame and Alberta Order of Excellence, with 3 Peace Prizes. Ghazali, please welcome our guest.
Yeah, this is a very hard one. I have so much respect for Chief Willie Littlechild. Also for everyone else in this lineup. But this, whenever you listen, you see Chief Littlechild in a room, you pay your respects, and you pay your respect. And also, what I also see is that whenever he talks, everyone is silent. Whether it is UNEMRIP, Permanent Forum, about like he brings so much knowledge and brings so much weight and history into every word that he says. So I'm very much very super excited to bring in Chief Willie Littlechild into this conversation. And just start off with maybe like with the first question. Chief, how are you doing? What's on your mind during the last 100 days? How have you been navigating this pandemic? All right. Oh, you're still on mute, sir? Oh boy. All right.
Willie, do you have a microphone, red microphone down in the bottom of your computer? So click there.
Well, there, Ghazali, you can unmute Willie from the...
Well, I can only ask to unmute. I cannot unmute him myself. I can only ask to unmute.
Okay.
Hold on.
Can somebody call him?
He's trying.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, I think I've got it. Okay, thank you very much for those kind words. And also good morning to everyone, or good afternoon for some. First, let me thank all of you who are responsible for this critically and very important, I'll say a timely masterminding conversation. It's overdue, but it's not too late to put our thoughts together on the now. Our old people have always told us, you must know where you came from yesterday to know where you are today, if you're going to know where you're going tomorrow. So for the last 100 days, my mind has been on gratitude. Gratitude, being thankful for the wisdom of our elders who have long held on to our traditional laws and our ways of being well. Thinking also and praying for our brothers and sisters who have been devastated by the coronavirus, COVID-19. How we at the Musqueam Cree Nation have navigated the pandemic was to rely on our traditional teachings and by the implementation of our rights. As some of you will know, we have an international treaty with Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and that dates back to 1876, 1877. But in that treaty, there's a treaty right to health. And in the wisdom of our elders back in 1876 and 1877, when they were negotiating the treaty, they also argued for a pestilence and famine clause, so that should there be any future famine or pestilence or a calamity such as we have today, then there was a clause there to protect the members of Treaty 6. And so with our traditional ceremonies, we invoke a state of emergency immediately in our territory, calling and invoking these articles of treaty. We also relied on traditional medicines. Our traditional medicines as are included in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And utilizing our inherent right to self-government and self-determination, we were very strict and disciplined among ourselves in how we dealt with the situation with an emergency response team. We had volunteers assisting our elders, taking care of those that needed help. But to make a long story short, relying on our Creator's gifts, the 4 nations of the Musqueam Cree, we still have ongoing prayer ceremonies. The 4 nations, we just finished our second Sundance this past weekend, a Sundance of Thanksgiving and prayer. And I mention those because for us in the 4 nations, a community of 18,000, we have absolutely 0 cases of the virus. And I believe firmly that it was because of the indigenous perspective of health. We look at health from a holistic perspective. Yes, it was an economic crisis. Yes, it was a health crisis. But for us, we look at it from a physical and mental and cultural and very importantly, spiritual perspective when we talk about health. So it was very gratifying to date. And of course, we keep praying that among our 18,000 members, we still have no cases at all. So for me, it's been one of gratitude, a thanksgiving to the wisdom of our elders who protected us by way of treaty back over 140 years ago now. So that's what's been on my mind. It was a mixed emotion, yes, because it's yet one of gratitude and yet one of concern about our brothers and sisters who have been devastated by the virus.
Thank you so much, Chief. And I absolutely love that gratitude is something that it has been in the back of your mind the whole time. And thank you for describing the situation of Musqueam. I had the privilege of being there for a while, like a couple of days. Zooming in a little bit on your almost 40 plus years of being in the Indigenous movement. Then this has been a question actually that's been on my mind for ever since I've gotten to know you, Chief. And maybe I'm asking this question because because to give young Indigenous persons permission to think about this, as in, what is the biggest mistake that you thought would be a major accomplishment, but turned into like a huge miss? Is there anything that comes to mind that you feel comfortable talking about?
Yes, I think for me, I like to think positive, and I'm still working on this big mistake. I was trying to convince Canada to put national legislation in place to implement the UN Declaration. And of course, so far I've missed on that. I've failed on that. But also, secondly, it's a twofold answer, because the second desire I had was to convince Canada to put into national legislation a National Council for Reconciliation. So these two, I call them mistakes as well, a misreading, I will say, I guess, of the response I would get from government, especially, and from private industry in some cases, from our own people in other cases, that I wanted to see national legislation in Canada to implement the UN Declaration, and also to have an oversight mechanism on that implementation by creating a National Council for Reconciliation. But I'm still working on that. So hopefully next time we talk, I can say, yes, we hit the target. We didn't miss it. It took a long time, looked a lot of patience, but that's what I reflect on. How do I keep working on this so that it becomes a success in the future? Well,
any way that I can help, Chief, just let me know. You have my contacts. I know that because in the introduction said that you're like an avid sportsman. What, in your view, what role does sports play in Indigenous governance and diplomacy? And maybe like a second part of it is like, what would like to see happening? Well, sports has been my life, actually, and offered many times the thanks that sports actually saved my life. So the role of sport in traditional games, I believe, plays a very important contribution in a number of ways to Indigenous rights. Actually, sports and traditional games are human rights. Article 31 of the UN Declaration, and it's also included in the OAS Declaration, is a reference to sports and traditional games. Indeed, Article 31 states in part that Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions, as well as the manifestations of that. And one of the manifestations of our culture is sports and traditional games. And I often argue that it's actually about a celebration of life. That's what sport and traditional games mean to me. And it fundamentally, very fundamentally also, it's an important element of our right to self-determination. Because when we conduct our games, for example, if you use the Olympic model, where else can we fly our own traditional flags? Where else can we own our own songs and sing and dance in an opening ceremonies, for example? So sport is important because it assists us in achieving our right to self-determination in a different way of approach. But what I'd like to see is states incorporate the second part of Article 31. And Article 31, since Canada has, for example, adopted the declaration without any qualifications, it calls on them, and all states, of course, in conjunction with Indigenous peoples, that states shall take effective measures
to recognize and protect and exercise these rights. So since Canada supports the declaration without qualification, I think now it must include adequate financial and human resources. After all, every child, indeed every person, has a right to play and a right to be happy. So while some may not hold sport as an important thing or traditional games as an important element of self-determination, I believe it's a unique and important way of uplifting our rights because it brings peoples together. It brings peoples together either in friendly competition or cultural exchange and so on to learn from each other. So yes, I really believe that sport has an important role to advance not only peace as a theme, but also to advance reconciliation.
In like tagging into that, what is the how we call it the system mindset that you see that is preventing Indigenous peoples from making the advantage that they want to see at the international level?
Well, I think one of the barriers that I see, and I hope I don't offend anyone by saying this, is that the mindset that I believe is presenting us from making the advances that we want to make in the international arena is actually how we interact or not interact with each other. Sometimes we have a common target and we don't want to work together, or we tear each other down. And I'm reminded of the Mayan prophecies during the Baktun ceremonies to end the long count calendar, 5,000 years, when the spiritual leaders in an all-night fire ceremony said goodbye to grandfather sun and said hello to baby sun in the morning as the sun came up and with a new calendar. During that prayer ceremony that evening, they predicted a new era and a new energy. And they said that things will get better for Indigenous peoples if 4 things happen. Firstly, they said that spirituality has to come back to leadership. Secondly, women and the role of women will become more prominent in leadership. And thirdly, very important message, I think, is that we need to build on the strengths of our people. And the last one is the hardest one. It's hard because we've experienced it. And they said, if we want things to be better for Indigenous peoples in the future, we must work very, very hard on unity, on working together. Put it in another way, one of our Cree elders said we must begin to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. And I used to have a coach by the name of Claire Drake. He since passed on his spiritual journey, but he would say to us, it's amazing what can be accomplished if no one cares who gets the credit. And I think that's where those kind of thought patterns need to be taken into account by ourselves and be willing to put our differences aside. As a 9-year-old boy instructed us recently, let's put our differences aside and begin to work together. And I think that'll be the key to having greater success. Because upon reflection to the last 42 years, we've actually accomplished a tremendous amount. But going forward, where we are now today, we can accomplish more. But I think what will be required of us is to actually really work together.
And I think I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The final question is, what do we need to do today so that we don't regret doing it in 6 to 12 months?
I believe what we need to do today so that we don't regret it in the coming months is to follow the advice of our spiritual leaders, our spiritual elders. For example, let's begin to build on the strengths of our people. Our people are very talented, as was said earlier by Lila. It's that action of building on those strengths of our people. Our elders have told us that. Lift each other up so that we can support each other. And also continue on this pattern of masterminding a plan of action like you're doing. Thank you for starting this, Ghazali, because this is important in terms of putting our minds together. No one or nothing can stop us once we have that mastermind in place, except one of us. So we need to continue this kind of exchange of views. And also, lastly, as the elders have told us, work very, very hard on unity. If we do those and follow those instructions of our elders, I think months from now, we will look back and say, that was a turning point for us, these conversations, because now we are working together. We are making change in the new norm or in the new way with technology and so on. So let's listen to the elders and act on their advice. And I think that will really help us achieve what we want to achieve. We have come a long way, but yes, we still have a long way to go. But let's use the traditional advice that we've been given before.
Thank you so much, Chief. Yeah, anything that we did not touch upon that you really want to talk about, like for the next, or your thoughts, or want Indigenous people to think about for the next 2 minutes?
I'm not really sure I have a particular thought in that line. I wish I had a good and easy answer actually to as to what kind of actionable things people can take, for example, to overcome the intergenerational trauma. Sometimes I think it's about mental health and mental wellness, but other times I think it's about believing in yourself, having a positive mental attitude, finding out who you are and being proud of who you are. If at times one is stuck in a rut of negativity, think about actually how beautiful a person you are, how gifted a person you are, and then also to be able to seek help when you need it. Because sometimes people think that it's a weakness to seek help, but it's actually a strength to seek help. And also it's in pardoning that we are pardoned, and to put it all in one line, with all what has happened to our people, globally, Indigenous peoples, we're still here, and it's because of our resilience, and it's because of our traditional knowledge. And in order to heal on an ongoing basis, I think we need to believe also in the power of forgiveness. yes, we've been hurt, we've been harmed. Sometimes we've been assassinated, we've been murdered. But I think the power of forgiveness will set us another step forward towards advancing reconciliation and peace.
Thank you so much, Chief, for ending it with such a very important topic amongst Indigenous peoples, intergenerational trauma and like mental health. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that we had to end this, but definitely, hopefully, that we can have a longer conversation at some point. Hopefully, in person, of course, so that we can with yourself, Chief, and everyone else in this entire lineup. Because it's been very inspiring and hopefully also inspiring for all other people listen to all your voices and your ideas. Ini, what's, I think this is it. This is like, there was episode 1.
Yes, sir. Episode 1, and it's amazing. What can I say? To see the young, the experience, the woman. And it's kind of, even for me, I'm not into that international things, but it's wow, it's amazing to hear that experiences and that's like few things that is important that maybe we don't think like such a traditional games. And over here in Panama, we started, and how it's important also in our culture, and it's one of our strengths. So Ghazali, what can I say? That's all their star over here, our guest, and now I got a feeling mixing feelings. I mean, so
yeah. So just for everyone watching, this was episode 1 of how to Indigenous governance and diplomacy for the now. It is a little bit of a taste of what is to come for the next episodes. So we tried to dive deep into the diplomacy and governance, but we're definitely going to dive deeper into it. So, and also hopefully, please continue. These are conversation starters. This is not end all be all. You heard from these amazing people. So please continue conversation amongst yourselves, go online, social media, tag us, #HowToIndigenousNow, go on Facebook. Please continue this conversation, because as you've heard from the people that have been talking today, it is very important that we build ourselves up in terms of governance and diplomacy. Next Friday is the next episode, 2 p.m. As well. So that is, that can be, that can be early, very early or very late all around the world. Hopefully that you will join us. In terms of this, we will post this both on podcast as well as on YouTube so that you can watch it afterwards. We try to live stream it to Facebook and YouTube as well. There has been some issues. We'll deal with it. Make sure that it's happening the next episode. And yeah, definitely want to thank Ini. Am I missing something? Interpreters.
No, yes, and DOCIP and Drumbeat Media and all the team that
TV
is
Indigena,
behind.
yourself.
TV Indigena, follow TV Indigena also. And yes, Tuomas for this great idea.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
What can I say? So yes, just remember that we have our next episode next Friday.
Yeah, so we have all your emails, so we'll send in the registration email for the next episode. Please do it straight away. And also, that's what we all want, is spread the word. Let people know that this is happening. Very excited for this to happen. We're doing 8, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 8 episodes. We're bringing the who's who, the world's leading Indigenous people's representatives and allies as well, talk about the governance and diplomacy. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, participating, talking, listening, and let me know what you think. Twitter @Gomaluku, or subscribe. Keep that conversation going. That's it for me. Ini, you take it away.
No, thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. So, what can I say? I will keep watching it again on YouTube. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day, evening, morning.